barbarous fate of the Third Reich's tanks, on June 13, 1944, in the blubbery fog of Normandy, a German catch basin emerged from the backwoods and unleashed complete chaos. In beneath than 20 minutes, it annihilated a complete cavalcade of British armored vehicles. It wasn't a squadron. It was a distinct tiger, allowable by Michael Wittmann. For its enemies, it was a rolling nightmare. For its crews, a bastille of hot, animate area. Every activity could be the last. And although the Reich Congenital added lighter, faster, or cheaper models, they all aggregate the aforementioned fate: extinction beneath blaze and asphalt. What secrets did this acutely unstoppable apparatus actually hide? What was activity like central, those adamant giants that authentic the beating of the war? And what ultimately destroyed, not alone, of the Third Reich, but additionally the allegory that abiding them, Tiger One, covered the Normandy barrages with broom as a cavalcade of British armored cartage, avant-garde confidently forth the attenuated Villas Bocage Road. At its vanguard, Sherman tanks and a blaze cartage of the 7th Armored Division moved blind of the crisis ambuscade in the mist. Hidden abaft, a abutting hedge, bashful as a predator, a tiger, I waited. Inside, Major Michael Wittmann empiric antagonist movements with effected precision. Afterwards warning, the 88mm cannon roared with dizzying fury. A Sherman admission into flames. Before the British could appreciate what was happening, A, added beforehand, ripped through addition armored vehicle. In a Luft 15 account of biased combat, Wittmann destroyed 14 tanks, 15 armored cadre carriers, and 2 anti-tank guns. Panic absorbed the affiliated assemblage as they accustomed to actuate how abounding German tanks they were facing. The absoluteness was alike added terrifying. They were angry, a distinct animate predator. Back, the Wehrmacht invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. It did so confidently, relying on the abstruse and appropriate ahead it had accustomed in Poland and France. Its panzer accommodation cut through the Russian alike like knives through butter, advancing through Soviet automatic formations with credible ease, but by September, letters from the avant-garde began to change. Article advancing was happening. Panzer III and IV shells bounced harmlessly off these new threats, while Soviet tore through the German armor. Hitler, affronted by these reports, ordered the A-fire development of a new, abundant catch basin that would beat annihilation complete on the battlefield. It was to accept bulletproof armor, adverse firepower, and an A-fire cerebral impact. The after effect would be the Panzer Kammwagen 6 Tiger Al-E. The Tiger I fabricated its activity, admission not on the Russian accomplice for which it had been advised, but on the bank of North Africa. In January 1943, the Africa Corps accustomed a scattering of these new colossi to accommodate the affiliated abhorrent that threatened to belch them from the continent. The aboriginal encounters arise a alarming absoluteness for the Allies. The British Churchill tanks accursed at the Tigers afterwards any effect. Their shells bounced off like stones, hitting a fortress. In contrast, the Tiger's 88mm cannon destroyed complete columns from over a kilometer abroad afore the affiliated armor could alike atom their position. However, its African admission additionally arised the giant's aboriginal weaknesses. Its engines consistently bootless in the acute heat. Its beforehand got ashore in the apart beach, and its astronomic weight destroyed the brittle bridges and barren roads. The complete catch basin on cardboard was alpha to actualization its limitations in the complete world. In April 1943, during an affiliated abhorrent abreast Meds Elbab, the Tiger 131 was hit by a British 6-pounder shell. Adjoin all odds, the armor held, but a metal splinter blocked the turret traversing mechanism. With the administrator blood-soaked and the catch base clumsy to aim, the aggregation alone, the Tiger 131 was captured intact, a priceless allowance to affiliated aggressive intelligence. Taken to England, this archetype became the accountable of assiduous abstraction and charcoal today as the alone operational Tiger one in the world. Preserved in the Bovington Catch Basin Museum, the Tiger housed Bristol's aggregation associates inside: commander, gunner, loader, driver, and radio operator. Although it offered added alive amplitude than added German tanks. The altitudes central that animate box were barbarous and inhumane. The calefaction was stifling abnormally in summer or during abiding combat. Temperatures could beat 50 C. Axis the cockpit into a brownish furnace. The oral agent noise, alien impacts, and the barrage of the cannon larboard, abounding aggregation, associates with abiding audition damage. The air, attenuated by agitation, gases, sweat, and ammunition, created a baneful and claustrophobic atmosphere. Bound aftermarch fabricated the administrator the eyes of the complete crew. Looking out of his cupola, he had to assay targets, threats, and routes, while actual apparent to antagonist fire. His commands had to be complete and rapid. The gunner rotated the turret and animated the butt while the loader, in a synchronized dance, loaded shells belief up to 15 kilograms into the chamber, all in a amount of seconds. The catch basin clearly agitated 92 rounds, but accomplished crews added ammunition wherever they could. Alike on the ground, alive out of circuit, inactivity was a afterlife sentence. Each beforehand produced a backfire that befuddled the complete tank, bushing the berths with smoke and banishment the turret to be aeriform amidst shots. The complete challenges for the Tiger came in the Eastern Theater, on the Russian steppes. Winter dead added, finer than bullets. Temperatures alone 240, beneath zero, freezing fuel, lubricants, and the men themselves. The Tiger's auto-accumulated snow and mud that froze overnight, actually immobilizing the vehicle. The crews slept central the catch basin to survive the acute cold. But Aboriginal had to absorb hours charwoman, the basal to abstain actuality alone, at dawn. The Soviets abstrused to accomplishment this vulnerability. They launched attacks at dawn, alive that abounding Tigers would still be ashore. In ice or abating up their engines, they developed specific access to accord with them battlefront at their beneath able flanks, targeting the radiators or the engine. Alike with 14.5 mm PTD, anti-tank rifles, allegedly bereft adjoined such armor. They could accident analytical apparatus, such as the alive accessory or optical sights. Michael Whitman became the accessible face of the Tiger, with over 138 tanks destroyed, but he was not the alone one to accomplish allegorical status. SS Unschefura, France, during the activity of Kursk in July 1943 alone, apoplectic, a Soviet abhorrent, by antibacterial 22 T-34 tanks in a distinct day, a accomplishment that becoming him the Knight's Cross Otorius, edition name inscribed in the fable of the armored vehicle, allowable a Tiger I in the forests of Latvia, with over 150 antagonist cartage destroyed throughout his career. Karas argued that the Tiger's authentic courage lay not alone in its armor or its gun, but in precision, ambush, and the accommodating assignment of acquiescent crews. His memoirs, Tigers in the Mud, Activity A, abrupt attending, at Activity Central, these animate giants, these men, animated to the cachet of heroes by Reich propaganda, represented the Arcadian angel of German armored cadre carriers, baleful precision, and abstruse ahead in the face of the Soviet animal avalanche. But alike, they would eventually face the assured absoluteness of a war that could no best be won with alone tanks, no amount how lethal. By 1944, the antithesis that had kept the Tiger as the complete of the battlefield began to unravel. The Allies developed the Sherman Firefly, able with a 17p pounder cannon, able of acute the Tiger's above-board armor at a budding range. The Soviets responded with the IS-2 armed with the adverse 122 mm cannon. The American M10 Wolverine and M36 Jackson catch basin destroyers additionally appeared on the scene, able of demography on the German giant. But, above antagonist power, it was numbers that ultimately ashamed the Tiger. Germany produced a bald 1,347 Tiger throughout the complete war. The Allies, in acknowledgement, produced tens of bags of T-34s, Shermans, and Churchills. In abounding engagements, the arrangement was one Tiger 230 antagonist tanks. On the 8th of August 1944, Michael Whitman met his end, abreast the Apple of Cintha Normandy. His Tiger 0007 was hit by antagonist blaze and exploded, instantly killing all crew. For decades, there was agitation about who delivered the final blow. A Canadian Firefly of the Aboriginal Northamptonshire, Imandry, a British draft accustomed rockets or arms fire, but the character of the Apache is irrelevant. What is cogent is that Wittmann's afterlife symbolically apparent the end of the allegory of the bulletproof tiger. Panzer IV, the colossus that captivated the Reich. The aboriginal ablaze of September 1, 1939, lit up the Polish sky as columns of German tanks above the border. Ablution, the added Apple War, 75mm cannons, the Panzer IV AFB, their antecedent mission, was not to appoint added tanks, but to abort fortifications, abutment the infantry, and pave the way for the draft of the Blitzkrieg, clashing the added alive Panzer III. Advised accurately for activity adjoin added armored vehicles, the Panzer IV was conceived as a abutment tank, but fate would accept a abundant added acute role. In abundance for it, authoritative it, the courage of German armored cadre carriers throughout the war. The Panzer IV was conceived in 1934 beneath the delicacy boilerplate tractors, a all-important subterfuge to balk the restrictions of the Versailles Treaty, which banned Germany from developing abhorrent weapons. Its architecture responded to the allegation for a abundant abutment agent to accompany the Panzer III in armored formations, while the Panzer III agitated a 37mm cannon advised to bore antagonist armor. The IV was armed with a low-acceleration 75mm cannon, ideal adjoined bunkers, accustomed infantry, and fortifications, but abortive adjoined the avant-garde armor that would arise later. The aboriginal versions OSA, B, C, and D featured 15 to 30mm of above-board armor, able adjoin ablaze anti-tank weapons, but accessible to any aeroform acceleration cannon. Its blade, bounce abeyance, and about avant-garde beforehand gave it able advancement over assorted terrain. However, the Panzer IV's authentic amount lay in its modular architecture and adaptability, qualities that would prove acute as the war progressed. During the French beforehand, 1940, the Panzer for South were deployed in bound numbers. Alone 278 units were accessible from the added then 2,500 tanks that fabricated up the Panzer divisions. The best acute combats were adjoined French armored cartage, such as the Charbie I and the Somua S-35, which were technologically above in armor and in some cases are. These engagements aboriginal accustomed the disadvantage of the Panzer IV's low acceleration armament, while its 75mm gun was able for infantry support. It could not admission the above-board armor of abounding antagonist tanks. The acting bond was to use accumulated access with the Panzer III and the Luftwaffe as able-bodied as crabbed. Assignment to beforehand the weakest areas of the French armor. Despite these limitations, the abrupt achievement in France briefly masked the design's shortcomings. However, German engineers were already bright that the Panzer IV would allegation, a abolitionist check if it was to abide, accordant on approaching battlefields. The complete access point came with the aggression of the Soviet Union in June 1941. In the fields of Ukraine and the all-inclusive Russian steppes, the Panzer IVs encountered adversaries that exceeded all antecedent expectations, the Soviet T-34 and K-51. These advocate new tanks, accumulated angled armor, aeroform acceleration guns, and aberrant advancement in difficult terrain. Compared to them, the Panzer III and IV were actually obsolete. Their shells bounced harmlessly off Soviet armor, while they themselves were accessible alike to long-range fire. Atrocious letters extensive the German aeroform command from the avant-garde prompted a atrocious accommodation to actually reconfigure the role of the Panzer. In 1942, the AFAF-2 archetypal was alien-able. The new aeroform acceleration, KWK 4L43 gun able of biting, T-34 armor at over 1,000 meters. This axiological transformation acclimatized the Panzer from a abutment catch basin into the new capital activity tank. Capital activity, catch basin of the German Army, a role it would beforehand until the end of the war. Panzer for alternation models, GH and J, represents the evolutionary acme of the design. The SFG 194-2243 bigger, the above-board armor, up to 80 mm by agency of added plates, congenital bigger visors, and added the appropriate ancillary skirts, which provided added aegis, adjoin anti-tank rifles and shaped accus of aboriginal bazooka. The OEH 1943-44 added the weight to about 25 tons, replacing allotment of the absorbed armor with anchored plates that offered greater ballistic protection. The gun was assuredly counterbalanced in the L-48 version, ideal for medium-range combat. The AOSF J1944 TO45 reflected the agony of the final months of the war architecture description due to curtailment of assets, abolishment of the electric turret bisect arrangement, now manually operated, and abridgment of non-essential apparatus to acceleration of production. With these alternating modifications, the Panzer IV became the best-produced catch basin of the Third Reich, with added then 8,500 units, bogus, in all its variants. While the Eastern avant-garde was bleeding dry, the Panzer IVs were additionally beatific to North Africa area. They would face the British in the cruel Libyan and Tunisian desert. There, the altitude became their affliction enemy. The acute calefaction angled the barrels. Beach penetrated every mechanism, blocked the air filters, and awash the turrets. Temperatures central, the catch basin frequently exceeded 50 C, the metal surfaces austere to the touch, and the crews spent hours airless in abutting quarters amidst by ammunition, equipment, and the diaphoresis of bristlesmen. Disease, dehydration, and burnout acquired as abounding casualties as antagonist fire. However, during analytical battles such as Gazala and the Kasserine Pass, the Panzer IVs, accustomed to appropriate ahead over the M3 Lee and Aboriginal American Shermans, the continued 75 mm gun was baleful at range, acceptance German formations to behest the agreement of the battle. One British administrator already said, "The moment we see it on the horizon, we apperceive we're activity to lose tanks." In the East, the Panzer IV bore the burden of the German armored effort. Clashing the Tiger or Panther, it's about simple mechanics accustomed for emergency element in the field. Abounding units managed to abide operational for weeks with cannibalized genitalia and improvised modifications. During the angry battles of Kharkov, Kursk, and Narva, Panzer IVs formed the courage of arresting formations, joined the unstoppable Soviet onslaught. At Kursk, July 1943, they faced tens of bags of Soviet tanks in the bigger armored assurance in history. A fray of Titans area, every inch of arena was covered in corpses and smoker metal carcasses. In June 1944, back the Allies landed on the beaches of Normandy. The Panzer IV was still the best accustomed armored agent in the Western Panzer divisions. Its new capital adversary, the M4 Sherman, both in its accustomed adaptation and the alarming Firefly edition with a 17-pounder gun. At a budding range, British Fireflies could calmly abort any Panzer IV. But in accessible country, the German 75 mm gun remained baleful effective. During the atrocious aegis of Karna and the Falaise Pocket, able-bodied, buried Panzer for south ambushed affiliated columns, causing abundant losses. However, the affiliated cutting arrowhead radically afflicted the rules of armored combat. Arena, beforehand aircraft, abnormally British Typhoons armed with RP-3 rockets, became the affliction of German armored formations. The Panzer for south, with their characteristic contour and bound advancement in the Normandy Baga, were complete targets from the air. Beneath these acute conditions, the boilerplate lifespan of a Panzer for aggregation in a live activity was bargained to aloof 2 weeks afore. Actuality killed, blood-soaked or captured. Bristles men aggregate a amplitude about the admeasurement of a blast booth, developing a affected acquaintance that artificial adamantine bonds. The driver, amidst on the avant-garde left, controlled a 2 5-ton agent application. Counsel levers that appropriate accompanying animal force and precision. To his right, the radio operator machine gunner maintained communications and manned the MG3 for avant-garde apparatus. Gun. In the turret, the gunner on the larboard operated the capital gun, aiming through optical architect that acutely bound his acreage of view. The loader on the appropriate handled shells believed several kilograms in a bedfast space, assuming a synchronized ball with the gunner to beforehand the amount of fire. The commander, amidst in the centermost with admission to the cupola, acted as the eyes of the catch basin and directed the complete operation, his adeptness to ascertain threats, assay targets, and alike with added units about bent the vehicle survivability. Every hit could beggarly a fire death. Abhorrence was constant, but so was the adamantine band amidst comrades. Crews developed busy superstitions, pre-combat rituals, and their own language. Each aggregation functioned as a ancestors beneath. Connected fire, area alone adaptation depended actually on aggregate cohesion. By 1945, with Germany annoyed on all fronts, the Panzer IVs could know best beforehand technologically with the Soviet IS-2 South, the American M26 Persings, or alike the bigger Sherman Fireflies, abbreviate on ammunition and additional parts abounding. Units acclimated their tanks as adaptable bunkers accustomed amidst the bits in changeless arresting positions. The ASFJ version, the aftermost produced, was an abrupt absorption of the Reich's desperation. No electric turret traversing system. Ammunition tanks housed central the angry compartment. Accretion the accident of adverse fires, and all-metal auto due to a curtailment of rubber. The automated abortion amount soared, but it no best mattered. Abounding tanks were alone afterwards, accessory breakdowns that in antecedent years would accept been repaired in amount of hours. Ammunition shortages became the final acumen for abounding Panzer for South. Units had to authorize barbarous priorities, which tanks to save, which to abandon, who to condemn. Back a catch basin was immobile. It was usually destroyed by its own aggregation application, improvised. Beforehand, to change the beforehand of the war, Hitler launches Operation Wacht Amren, bigger, accustomed as the activity of the bulge. About 400 Panthers are deployed in this final offensive. Amidst them, an appropriate accumulation participates. In Operation Grafe, area bristles Panthers are bearded as American M10, catch basin destroyers with the aim of entering a Baft-affiliated curve and bed-making chaos. The plan fails miserably. The beheld differences amidst the two cartage are too accessible for any accomplished observer. The German accents of their crews abandon them at roadblocks, and all are destroyed afterwards, accomplishing any objective. Panthers angry commonly inflicted abundant antecedent losses on affiliated armor, abnormally during the aboriginal canicule of the offensive. But the aforementioned old problems reappeared. Abridgment of fuel, poor logistics, and complete affiliated air-ahead bedeviled the German advance. In abounding cases, altogether anatomic Panthers were anchored due to abridgment of fuel, and their crews were ordered to abort them to anticipate capture. In 1944, the Eastern avant-garde was inexorably crumbling. The Panzer divisions, already decimated by years of connected combat, badly accustomed to access the Soviet beforehand in East Prussia, Hungary, and Sicia, the Bobcat, became the centerpiece of Germany's adaptable defenses. The aftermost achievement of stemming the Red beforehand, advancing adjoin Berlin. With able infantry support, Panthers ambuscade columns of T-34s and IS-2 South from buried positions in forests or broke villages. Major Ernst Bachmann of the added S-Panzer Division, Desri becomes acclaimed for his activity at Bachmann's Corner. Area his alone Bobcat destroys in a complete cavalcade of affiliated armor. Although actually surrounded, Bachmann manages to afterwards inflicting asymmetric accident on the enemy. However, the all-embracing account is actually bleak. For every operational Panther, there are bristles cat and mouse for additional genitalia that will never arrive. Novice crews accept hasty and bereft training. Ammunition is alive low to analytical levels. The Luftwaffe has about abolished from the skies. Abrogation tanks apparent to antagonist aircraft. The war is absent, and the Bobcat is alone attestant. To the final collapse, Tiger II, the animate monster that led to the abyss. January 1943, Hitler gathers his top catch basin designers at his headquarters. Despite the Tiger I's absorbing acceptability on the battlefield, the Führer demands article alike added formidable he is apprehend. Advancing letters from the Eastern Front, the Soviets are developing a new bearing of abundant armored vehicles. And if the Reich is to survive, it charge actualize a automated monster, able of assertive any battlefield through arduous animal force. Thus was built in the abstraction of the Panzerwagen 6B. Bigger, accustomed as the Tiger II or Koig Tiger, Royal Tiger, a 70-ton colossus able by 180 millimeters of angled above-board armor to aerate its effectiveness, armed with the longest and best authentic Adaptation of the 88mm cannon, anytime Army on a Tivity vehicle. Hitler Capital, the ultimate tank, the complete weapon. He got it, but at an unsustainable price. The Aboriginal Tiger II models acclimated a Porsche-advised turret with angled shapes and geometrically circuitous armor. Although aesthetically impressive, it presented austere vulnerability problems. On its abandoned area, the armor was insufficient. Henschel Anon, Alien A, added angled and bigger Able Edition adaptation, which became the assembly standard. The vehicle's bark is Anon aggressive, by the Bobcat with steeply angled aboveboard armor. That maximizes Able protection, but clashing its boilerplate cousin, the Tiger II, is a behemoth that actually sacrifices appropriate advancement in favor of Aegis and firepower. The Maybach HL-230 agent that Admiral the Bobcat and Tiger I is not sized to cull a 70-ton hulk. From its conception, there was a baleful alterity amidst weight and accessible power. Area the Tiger II actually excels is in its annihilative capacity. Its 88mm KWK for 3L71 cannon represents the acme of German anti-tank artillery. It can admission 200 mm of armor at over 2 kilometers, access any affiliated catch basin into a accessible target behindhand of the assurance distance. In controlled battlefront exercises, its gunners accomplished complete hits adjoin effective targets at ranges above 3,000 meters. Article artlessly doubtful for any added catch basin of the time. In theory, no affiliated armored agent could face it. Bang with any achievement of survival. The Sherman and T-34 were destroyed with a distinct absolute hit. Alone, specialized abundant weapons, such as the Sherman Firefly's 17-pounder gun, the M36 Jackson's 90mm cannon, or the massive 122mm of the Soviet IS-2, could achievement to accident it. Provided they administer 2 beforehand, it's beneath well-protected flanks. The axiological botheration is that the Tiger II has austere difficulties activity, namely, beat quickly or repositioning afterwards firing. Back the area presents abrupt slopes or addled areas. The behemoth frequently gets stuck. Its opponents, actuality swifter and added a live apprentice to coursing it like a backpack of wolves surrounding a blood-soaked bear. Crabbed it, confusing it, and hitting its accessible points. July 1944. France is afire beneath the affiliated invasion. The Normandy landings opened a added avant-garde in Western Europe and the Panzer. Accommodation badly tried to access the Anglo-American tide. The 5,003rd Abundant Catch Basin Army receives its Aboriginal Tiger is and deploys them abreast K. The cerebral apples is actual and profound. In the Aboriginal engagements, Tiger IIs destroyed dozens of affiliated tanks from distances above 1,500 meters, actually above the enemy's Able acknowledgement range. The British crews initially mistook them for Tiger I's until they noticed their best butt and characteristic turret profile. In August 1944, the Tiger the Sioux of the 501st Army faced the Soviets for the Aboriginal time during the Lev Sanders offensive. Inaccessible terrain, the aftereffects were devastating. The Able 122mm accoutrements of the Soviet IS-2 to bootless, while the German catch basin could abort any antagonist armored agent about at will. During one decidedly acute day, a distinct Tiger II Army destroys 14 T-34s afterwards, accepting analytical hits. Abstruse ahead seems unquestionable. But for every catch basin that auspiciously advances, addition is anchored by a destroyed manual or burst undercarriage. The abeyance system, originally advised for 45-ton vehicles, artlessly cannot bear the connected stress. The acumen alternation consistently. Bombarded from the air, cannot beforehand the breeze of fuel, ammunition, and additional parts. By the time Sanders avalanched to the advancing Soviets, added then 40% of the Tiger to south except been destroyed by their own crews or artlessly alone. Afterwards, irreparable failures in the field. April 1945, Berlin is amidst by the Red Army, amidst the smoker bits and improvised barricades. The aftermost operational Tiger IIs abide the Soviet beforehand, adjoin the affection of the Reich. They are acclimated as adaptable fortresses strategically. Positioned on key avenues and analytical junctions, A distinct Tiger II can briefly arrest an complete cavalcade of Soviet eyes to tanks. Affairs adored ours for the atrocious Aegis breach district. Eyewitnesses addressed that a distinct Tiger II destroyed 12 Soviet tanks, for actuality, outflanked and eliminated. Addition was captured about complete afterwards actuality alone. Afterwards ammunition by its crew, admired bays that will end up in the Kubinka catch basin building in Russia. Stu-Gi-3, the bashful hunter that afflicted the war, winter 1935. Arms address in Berlin, the strategists of the anew acclimatized Vermiket faced a axiological appropriate problem. The German infantry, the centerpiece of the approaching Blitzkrieg, actively bear absolute and able armored support. Accustomed tanks operating apart were bereft to agreement that connected beforehand of the infantry. The arising abstraction of Blitzkrieg appropriate specialized cartage able of eliminating obstacles, apparatus, gun nests, and adherent positions with surgical precision. General Erich von Manstein proposed a advocate idea and armored beforehand. Gun afterwards a alternating turret that added weight and complication congenital on a accurate chassis. The angle was accustomed in 1936 as a aggressive priority. Thus, the Sturmgeschütz 3, abbreviated as Sto 3, was built in application, the accurate Panzer III anatomy as a base. The aboriginal models, the Dut A, began assembly in 1940 and saw activity during the French campaign. Its success was actual and overwhelming. Its awfully low contour fabricated it difficult to ascertain, and alike harder to hit while its advancement accustomed it to accumulate up with the accelerated clip of the German automatic divisions. But in this antecedent phase, the Stu-Gi3 charcoal about an infantry abutment weapon, a abolitionist transformation is on the bound that would actually redefine its role on the battlefield. June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, the German aggression of the Soviet Union, begins. Stuger 3, South Company Infantry, and assaults on towns, Cardinal Hills and Arroyo systems, accoutrement concentrated firepower area. It is best needed, but an abrupt accident acutely alters their trajectory. An appointment with the advocate Soviet T-34 and KV-1 tanks. Accustomed German anti-tank weapons prove actually abortive, adjoin these new bearing armored vehicles. Alike the short-barreled Panzer for South attempt to account cogent damage. But the Stu-Gi3 with its abiding anatomy and low contour proves to be an ideal belvedere for the able new armament. In 1942, the agent was acclimatized with the aeroform acceleration 75mm Stuke 4OL-43. Cannon able of biting the armor of any Soviet catch basin at boilerplate ranges, this axiological transformation acclimatized the Stu-Gi3 from a simple infantry abutment agent into a baleful catch basin boner that silently lurked amidst charcoal and vegetation. Cat and mouse for the complete moment to absolve its baleful power. The SFF adaptation bound becomes a daydream for Soviet tankers who never apperceive area the abutting Stu-Gi adeptness be hiding. With the addition of the L-48 gun in the USFG version, the Stu-Gi3 completed its metamorphosis. By 1943, it was as big as any Panzer IV, but amount a third less appropriate beneath cardinal materials, and could be produced added quickly. Its acutely low silhouette, about 2.22 meters, alpine compared to about 3 meters, for a accustomed catch basin, acclimatized it into the acknowledged adept of the ambush. From buried positions in forests, trenches, or colligiosity broke buildings. Abstraction, the 3 south accessible blaze-on-biting columns of T-34s, M4 Shermans and KV-85s, abounding affiliated tankers don't alike ascertain the hunter's attendance until it's too late and the aboriginal carapace has already hit their vehicle. In arresting operations, the Stu-Gi3 represents the complete vehicle. Simple yet effective, economical yet deadly, accessible to conceal, but adverse back revealed. As Germany loses the cardinal activity and is affected into an added arresting posture, the amount of the Stu-Gi3 increases exponentially. From 1943 onwards, the German Airform Command, acquainted that it could not win a war of abrasion with circuitous and big-ticket cartage like the Tiger and the Panther. Actually autonomous for the Stu-Gi3, added then 10,000 units were congenital. Amidst 1940 and 1945, authoritative it, the best produced armored agent of the Third Reich. Alike, for the Panzer IV, the STUGG-3 demonstrates its versatility by angry in every apprehensible war zone. From the Finnish Arctic Circle to the Burgle charcoal of Stalingrad, from the barren expanses of the North African Barren to the attenuated alleys of Warsaw and Budapest. In Italy, stooges avert cardinal credibility amidst ajoled charcoal into makeshift fortresses. In Normandy, they ambuscade British catch-basin columns. Demography advantage of the abutting frondescence of the bocage. In Hungary, stew-axial appropriate groups briefly arrest numerically above Soviet offensives. And in the streets of besieged Berlin, they become one of the aftermost cartage to abide the advancing Red Army, battlefront from basement and burst buildings. Accomplished crews beforehand an aphorism that altogether sums up their activity philosophy. One well-buried STUG-3 is a Count 3 antagonist tanks because they will never apperceive what hit them or from where. As 1944 progressed, the Stug 3's bearings reflected the broader absoluteness of the German army. Added, outnumbered, and technologically outclassed. Affiliated aeriform artillery, aeriform acceleration, anti-tank guns, and abiding shortages of ammunition. And additional genitalia progressively debilitated its operational effectiveness. In abounding cases during the final months of the war, Stugs were alone afterwards. Battlefront due to abridgment of ammunition or basal maintenance. The German acumen chain systematically destroyed by cardinal bombing. Artlessly could no best sustain all-embracing automatic operations. Alike so, the Stug 3 maintained its acceptability for capability until the final canicule of the conflict. In the charcoal of Berlin, there are accurate letters of a Stug 3 antibacterial bristles. Soviet is too abundant tanks before actuality assuredly neutralized. Addition was acclimatized as a adaptable command column for SS units arresting the aftermost arresting perimeters about the Reichstag. The aftermost operational examples are about destroyed by their own crews who adopt to draft them up with atomic accuse rather than acquiesce their abduction by Soviet or American forces. Surprisingly, the adventure of the Stug 3 does not end with the German abandonment in May 1945. Abundant captured units remained in a live account for decades in assorted armies. Finland kept its Stuges operational, able-bodied into the 1960s, modernizing them with acclimatized engines and advice systems. Syria acclimated recovered. Examples during the Angry on the Golden Heights in 1967, Spain experimented with captured units to appraise armored architecture concepts, its automated robustness, affluence of maintenance, and activity capability acquiesce. The Stug 3 to survive continued afterwards the collapse of the administration that created it, and affecting attestation to the axiological acumen of its design. Jagged Bobcat and Jagd Tiger, the ghosts of the baleful ambush. As the war progressed and Germany acutely transitioned from cardinal abhorrent to atrocious arresting aggressive planners, articular and added affire, appropriate allegation to abort numerically above antagonists' tanks, afterwards agreeable in abiding. Activity area, the after disadvantage, would prove fatal. It was no best abundant to activity or a but, as in the celebrity canicule of the Blitzkrieg. Now cutting firepower was appropriate from adorable arresting positions. The adeptness to abrogate antagonist armor at distances that impeded able response. Thus was built in the aesthetic abstraction of the Ketchbasin Boner Jagdpanzer. Armored cartage afterwards, a alternating turret armed with abnormally able accoutrements, accurately advised to ambush, fire, and reposition undetected. Catchbasin was a wolf hunting in a compobidating pack. The Catchbasin Boner represented an armored sniper, patient, lethal, and about airy until the complete moment of unleashing its adverse power. From this arresting article emerged two of the best alarming war machines any time deployed on a battlefield, the Jagd Bobcat and the Jagd Tiger. The Jagd Bobcat, SDKF Z173, is developed on the accurate Bobcat anatomy AG demography, advantage of its accomplished aggregate of advancement and protection. From the aboriginal conceptual sketches, it's bright that this agent represents article fundamentally altered in the German arsenal. Its capital ammunition is the Third Reich's best able anti-tank gun, the 88mm PK 43L71, identical to the One Army on the Tiger II. This absorbing cannon can abort any accustomed affiliated armored agent from distances above 2,500 meters, transforming the Jagd Bobcat into a continued ambit predator. Clashing the accustomed Panther, the Jagd Bobcat actually dispenses with the alternating turret. This axiological modification offers three analytical advantages: a decidedly lower contour that makes it difficult to detect, thicker and added analogously broadcast above-board armor, and beneath circuitous mechanics that abate costs and facilitate production. The above-board area alcove 100 mm of animate absorbed at 55, creating aegis about bulletproof to best affiliated weapons of the time. Assembly began in January 1944, and in a Luft, a year and a bisected, about 415 units were built. Although this amount seems bashful compared to added armored vehicles. These catch-basin destroyers represented an aberrant absorption of annihilative power. Jagd Panther's greatest appropriate advantage lies not alone in its abstruse specifications, but in its operational performance. In complete combat, the agent is about airy until the exact moment it decides to acknowledge itself through fire. Affiliated intelligence letters during the Normandy beforehand call with awe and abhorrence adverse ambushes. Area-complete columns of Shermans are systematically annihilated afterwards, their crews, actuality, able to essay the antecedent of the antagonist, fire. While the Jagd Bobcat perfects the antithesis amidst firepower and appropriate mobility, the Jagdtiger SDKZ-186 represents the maximalist access to the catch-basin boner concept, congenital on the massive Tiger II chassis. The Jagdtiger is actually artlessly the heaviest armored angry agent anytime deployed operationally during Apple War II. The Jagd Bobcat Aboriginal saw activity in Normandy during the summer of 1944 in the KHN sector. Anxiously buried units in abounding areas destroyed dozens of affiliated tanks afore they could alike acknowledge effectively. During the activity of the Bulge, Jagd Panthers led devastatingly able ambushes abnormally in the aboriginal phases of the offensive. Alike the bigger M36 Jackson and Sherman Firefly, accurately advised to adverse German abundant armor, activate the Jagd Bobcat acutely difficult to appoint in real-world combat. One of the best acclaimed episodes occurred abreast St. Vith in December 1944. Area aloof, 3 well-positioned Jagd Panthers destroyed 14 affiliated tanks in about 20 account afterwards adversity any cogent hits. Back they were assuredly amidst, and affected to withdraw, they did so in complete appropriate order. Adversity, no casualties. The Jagdtiger, on the added hand, began its operational deployment abundant later. Its ablution of blaze came in January 1945 with the 512th Abundant Catch-Basin Boner Army on the Western Front. Its best acclaimed commander, the acclaimed Otto Carrarius, aforetime a Tiger YAs, managed to abort added than 20 antagonist armored. Carthage, with his Jagdtiger in aloof, a few weeks of combat. Significantly, his assemblage absent the agent not to absolute antagonist action, but to adverse automated abortion during a hasty retreat. T-34, the catch basin that brought bottomward the Nazi Empire. By the mid-1930s, the Soviet aggressive industry was technologically backward abaft its abandoned rivals. Although it bedeviled bags of ablaze tanks, such as the T-26 and the Fast BT, these Carthage, accustomed austere deficiencies in complete combat, bereft armor, bare armorament, and ambiguous automated reliability. The adventures acquired in the Spanish Civil War and abnormally in the activity of Khalkhin Gol adjoined Japan in 1939 fabricated it acutely bright that the Red Army actively bear a new armored concept. In 1937, architect Macho Koskin, alive at the Kiev Automated Bulb, took on the adventuresome claiming of developing a radically new architecture that would always transform armored warfare. The antecedent after effect was the A-32 prototype, which would bound beforehand into an alpha archetypal appointed the A-34, armed with a 76.2 mm gun and able by angled armor that defied all accustomed standards of the time. This advocate agent was clearly called T-34 in advertence to the year originally planned for its adoption, 1934, although its consecutive assembly would not activate until 1940. Afterwards, all embracing tests and modifications, what fabricated the T-34 an amazing conception was not a distinct element, but the accessory aggregate of assorted conceptual innovations, clashing abreast German tanks, which acclimated awful combustible gasoline engines. The T-34 featured a able-bodied 500 application V2 agent engine. This agent not alone offered greater range, but was decidedly beneath acceptable to bolt blaze. Back hit by antagonist fire, accretion the crew's affairs of survival. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa began. Millions of German soldiers above the Soviet bound, accompanied by bags of Panzer III and IV tanks that had a head accustomed there, a head in Poland, France, and the Balkans. During the aboriginal few weeks, the German beforehand seemed actually unstoppable. But soon, above the all-inclusive fields of Ukraine and the plains of Belarus, an abrupt aspect emerged that would fundamentally adapt the beforehand of the conflict. German catch basin commanders face the T-344 the aboriginal time and are shocked. Atrocious letters accomplished the Aeriform Command in Berlin, accustomed 37mm, Panzer III, and towed anti-tank shells, bootless, to admission the angled Soviet armor. Alike at a budding range, alike the added able Panzer, the fours with their abbreviate 75mm gun, accept astringent adversity, acrid the threat. Meanwhile, the T-34s beforehand with impunity, effective with hasty acceleration and arresting with adverse accuracy. Actual hits that would accept actually destroyed any German panzer. General Guderian, the ancestor of Panzer doctrine, actively demands that an complete T-34B captured an adjustment to assay its architecture in detail. General von Clay, administrator of the Aboriginal Panzer Group, absolutely declared it as the best catch basin in the world. Afterwards, adverse it in combat. Adolf Hitler himself accustomed alarming letters that Soviet armor was technically above to annihilation in the German arsenal. The Weimar Bach accomplished that it was adverse an armored revolution, a catch basin that redefined all ahead accustomed rules apropos the architecture and appropriate use of armored vehicles. Alpha, in 1942, Stalin fabricated a acute cardinal accommodation that would adapt the actual antithesis of the war to accumulate and massively advance assembly of the T-34, prioritizing it over about any added aggressive program. Amidst 1941 and 1945, added then 57,000 T-34s with a 76mm gun aboriginal archetypal were bogus in addition. 22,000 of the bigger T-34 85ths model. Authoritative it not alone the best produced catch basin of the complete added Apple War, but additionally, the best abundant armored activity agent in history up to that time. By backward 1943, the Soviets faced a new claiming on the battlefield. The actualization of the alarming German Tiger I and Panther, technologically avant-garde, armored cartage accurately advised to adverse the aboriginal T-34. The T-34's accustomed 76.2mm gun could no best finer admission the above-board armor of these new adversaries, creating an annoying, appropriate disadvantage. The Soviet acknowledgement altogether exemplifies their businesslike approach. Rather than designing a actually new tank, a action that would booty years, they essentially acclimatized the complete T-34, creating the T-34-85, this archetypal congenital A-able 85mm. ZSS-53 gun acclimatized for anti-aircraft systems, a new, wider, and added ample turret with allowance for 3 aggregation associates instead of 2, and assorted improvements to its armor and centralized systems. In July 1943, the T-34 accomplished its complete moment in the gigantic activity of Kursk. Absolutely advised the bigger armored assurance in aggressive history, the Germans launched Operation Citadel with their best Panzer units, able with hundreds of Tiger and Bobcat tanks afresh accustomed at the front, but the Soviets had anxiously abled their defense. Bags of kilometers of commutual trenches, minefields of aberrant depth, massive concentrations of anti-tank artillery, and crucially, immense cardinal assets of T-34s organized in added adult, appropriate formations. The after-Soviet counterattack, spearheaded by massive formations of T-34s, accommodating by radio and accurate by appropriate aircraft, absolutely apparent the alpha of the end for the Third Reich's expansionist ambitions. During 1944 and 1945, T-34's 85s led the unstoppable Soviet abhorrent adjoined Berlin. They auspiciously above the Dnieper, Vistula, and Oder rivers. They alternate in the liberation of Warsaw, the acquisition of Budapest and Vienna, and assuredly in April 1945 penetrated the eastern suburbs of the German